Hi everybody, Jared Johnson here. Happy Monday. I didn't send out a video or an update last week. It was spring break. I was on vacation and loving it. But this week, we definitely had some activity over the weekend. We saw the stock market go crazy on Friday. What does that mean? What are we to expect here? There's a couple of things to look at that I think are pretty interesting. Sometimes when these kinds of things happen, where there's global conflict, the market gets surprised. It can be pretty detrimental in the short term, but we've also seen in the longer term, even in the near term, that certain things tend to behave pretty well. Let's have a look. Let's have a little look at what we're looking at here at Union Hedge Funds, and kind of just a few thoughts of mine about with where I think is a good place to focus. With all this global conflict, we've had Iran starting to attack Israel. Israel's already in a battle with with the others. We've got Russia and Ukraine going on forever. Does this keep adding on, and what are the effects? It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But here's a few places that I think my energy and time are going to be focused. I've spent a lot of time talking about China. The last several videos I've talked how I think China is a great opportunity. But let's look at a few things here. Here's a material stock. Here is let me just show you. Well, I mean we can really look at any of these and kind of get a pretty similar picture of what is going on and how everything is expected to go. Let's look at aluminum, for example. Let's see what old aluminum has going for it. We saw. Remember, Russia and Ukraine went into battle early 2022, and we saw a lot of things happen in aluminum, steel, copper, a lot of the material stocks. Here's January 2022. We saw a pretty quick, we'd had a really nice uptrend in some of these aluminum stocks. This is Alcoa, for example. And then by January, when did Russia and Ukraine announce everything? It was January, February, somewhere right in there. And we see, aluminum stocks go up another 50% before, obviously selling off, because then, we have this big shock in interest rates where we're going to raise and we're never going to stop, right? But it was interesting to see that over kind of that couple of month period, January till about March, April, basically, we saw some pretty good, pretty solid aggressive movement. And keep in mind, that had happened since, COVID sell-offs and so on. That kind of a move happened after about a 2-year, 1,200% run up, right? Then we still got another 50% out of that when Russia and Ukraine started fighting each other. And yes, there was a lot at stake with materials that Russia produces and what kind of squeeze is that going to put on the market. We saw that happen in a lot of different places. We definitely saw that happen in steel as well. So, same thing. Here's our kind of early 2022. We get the news, things bump up 50, 60%. Again, that is after, a COVID rally. Already this stock was already up 600-700% over a pretty short period of time, and it still bumped up another 50 or 60% on the news that Russia and Ukraine were going to battle it out. So all I'm saying is, as global conflict kind of increases, I just wonder what some of these stocks are going to do. I think obviously there's the question of do these oil-producing countries, if they go to battle, what are we going to see happen to energy stocks? Are we going to see energy prices spike? Maybe. We've seen in past conflicts that energy prices actually kind of went down with Iraq and Kuwait and all of those things. So energy prices kind of went down as opposed to going up. But what I'm just going to try to do the best I can at is I'm going to try to trade what I see. What are some of these big patterns that we're seeing in a lot of interesting places? Let's look at energy for a moment. Look at this chart right here and tell me what we're looking at. I look at this chart and I think to myself, okay, here we have, this is XOP, the ETF for oil and gas exploration, production, so on. Nothing happens all the way through June. Gas prices are crazy, and then things kind of calm down. And we get this just nice little, pretty simple, pretty straightforward wedge forming. And this is getting more and more narrow, more and more narrow. And then we get this huge run up. Now, it's failed at some of these previous levels, which is interesting. But where do things go from here? Do we have patterns? Do we have trends that we can trade, and things that have potential of making much bigger moves up? I think very possibly. I think very, very possibly. There's a lot of uncertainty in the energy space, depending on how the political landscape goes and what kind of how that will benefit or hurt energy prices themselves. And so we're kind of looking at all that. We're keeping all that in mind and just watching to see where that goes, how that plays out. But one thing that's pretty interesting as we look at energy, as we look at materials, and so on, we're watching a few things go crazy. We're watching copper prices. There's that wedge again, right? That wedge where we have this kind of movement and then away it goes, right? Which gives us a lot of room to these highs. Now copper, aluminum, we've seen gold going straight up. We're seeing a lot of these commodities, these just heavy industrial commodities themselves, really taking off and making a run. And I think I'm staying on board with this. I'm staying on board with energy having a big move. I'm staying on board with the materials having potentially a big move here. We're seeing a lot of attention being put there. When we look at these guys, like NVIDIA, and we see that we've had big moves in these material stocks, and we've seen NVIDIA do nothing for the last. This is February, right? February goes into this range, and it's moved around, and it might continue to move around. We might just continue to see something like that, where there's really no major opportunity there. Obviously, if NVIDIA dips, I think there's going to be a lot of dip buyers. I don't know where that would go, and I'm not really even counting on that. I'm just kind of counting on the fact that NVIDIA has made a big run, and it might just be kind of out of steam for a little while. We might see a lot of sideways movement. If we do, then that should continue to fuel the hard commodities, the coppers and gold and steel and aluminum and energy, for continuations there. The market just kind of goes back and forth, right? We see this kind of exposure in one side. Sometimes that side is like all tech, right? And sometimes it's a few stocks. We've seen NVIDIA and a couple of these chip stocks just go crazy. And it's like, okay, that's great, but now what? And the rest of the market kind of gets neglected. And now the rest of the market has been catching up for a little while. And I think there's more of that left. And so that's kind of where we're putting our time and energy and attention. If we look at some of these copper stocks, we looked at copper. Here's a copper stock. This is FCX, and we're seeing some reactions at some of these pretty significant highs, right? We have this high all the way back here. That was that run up with the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022. We had that big run up, and then interest rate pain, and then just a lot of sideways. And it's been running hard the last month, running really hard and making some great moves there. So I'm watching kind of this $52 level on FCX to see if we're headed back into some of these highs, maybe up in the 60s, 70s. We'll see how that goes. So far, we've had this little reaction. We're going to see how this plays out, where that goes. We're seeing kind of a similar picture as we've seen in so many places. Here's a Rio, big wedge right here, right? Big wedge. This thing has just been narrowing. Do we think that copper can help these guys, pull out of this sideways? Because really, it's just been a sideways movement, right? We've just seen kind of this sideways movement. So can we get it out of that and get a significant run higher? I think and I hope. I hope and I think. And so we're going to see where we go and how that runs. But I'm just kind of watching these couple of things. I think there's a lot to be said about where these are going and how we're going to get them there. So a lot of material, a lot of energy focus. I'm always watching China. I'm always on China. I'm always keeping an eye on China. But I think these guys have a lot of good potential for us. So let's see how that plays out with kind of the global conflict that is seemingly escalating more and more by the weeks and months. And if there's going to be more and more money pouring into some of these hard industrial materials. So that's what I'm going to keep my eye on. Watch it. Good luck. Feel free to comment on anything. I'm happy to discuss. These are, not trade ideas. I'm just sharing my thoughts and my ideas with you guys. But good luck, and we'll follow up as the week goes along. Thanks, everybody. Take care.